Jeremy here. You've all had a chance to see him. Wave hello. I'm really excited to have Jeremy on. Not just because he's got the background from SalesLoft. He's the SVP of Sales Strategy and Operations at SalesLoft, which is a pretty heavy, pretty weighty title. Carries some good street cred in this industry. So he's maxed out on social proof. Over the last 20 years, he's had a crazy career spanning the semiconductor engineering, product development, sales, and marketing. He's worked for Gartner, AMA, GLG, CV Insights, and I'm going to butcher this last one, Xilinx?
Oh, Xilinx. That was my first job, as an engineer.
Xilinx, cool. I was looking at it. I'm like, is this like the ways, like the Spanish or the Mexican way of pronouncing the X, or is this like just the American like xylophone? So I stumbled there. But Jeremy's going to be talking to us about how we can double our reply rates. Jeremy, thanks for jumping on with us. I'm really excited myself to see what you have for us today.
Awesome. So I'll move to screen sharing, and I'll just remind folks I will be actively monitoring the Q&A as we do this. So if you put your Q&A in there, that would be great. It will be offline afterwards, I guess, Slack, but I'm not gonna watch Slack and Q&A at the same time. So just the Q&A, please. And then we're going to cover a lot of ground today of tips and tricks for prospecting best practices. Just in case I don't hit everything, I do welcome LinkedIn connections, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Colin, can you see my screen okay right now?
Yep, got it.
All right, so let's do it and geek out a little bit here. So at a high level, going to go through cadences. I think most people are familiar with that if they're on a predictable revenue webinar, since you guys literally wrote the book on the topic. So I'll just hit on that at a high level, talk a little bit about personalization and some of the things that I've been seeing and recommendations that I've got there. And then we'll go into actual data-driven email best practices. All right, firing up my chat window. Cool. All right, so let's talk about cadences. So people already know this, right? It's cadences are all about using multiple channels in order to engage your prospects and customers. Folks are pretty ubiquitously using phone, email, and social. SMS is creeping in, although I think SMS is much better suited towards once you actually have a relationship with a prospect. And then direct mail with the likes of Sendoso and Alice and other providers is becoming increasingly prevalent. So I think you really want to be thinking about all 5 of those channels. Beyond the obvious, I think one tip I would love to give sellers is all about how do you make sure your prospects actually attend the meetings? So how do you minimize your no-show rates? And one of the best things you can do as a seller, this is kind of the first tip to take away, is to when you actually book a meeting, at the end of that call, say, hey, I just wonder if you would mind sharing your cell phone number, not because I'm going to add it to the database or anything like that. You need to be genuine about that, but simply so that I can send you a reminder a few minutes before the call. Or reach you just in case you're otherwise busy when at the scheduled call time. So I think that's one of the best ways to minimize no-show rates, and it's skin in the game for them, right? They're committing to give you a little important nugget of personal information. So that's tip 1. All right, so when you actually build a cadence, lots of different ways to build it. I wanted to show you guys a recommended cadence design structure, which we actually use and is actually based on a decent amount of data science. So what you see here is 15 touches over 16 business days. And the characteristics of this, first of all, is that we're trying to provide a little bit of breathing room between each touch or touch cluster. And you can see the breathing room. You'll see the pattern once I tell you what the pattern is. You'll see it right away, which is if you're real geeky, it's almost Fibonacci series. But if you're not so geeky, you can just think of it as adding +1. So you do your touches on day 1. You add 1. That's day 2. Now I'm going to add 2 to day 4. I'm going to add 3 to day 7. Add 4 days, day 11, add 5 days, day 16. So you're basically doing that +1, +2, +3, +4, +5. So the reason you're spreading that out is if you hit every one like every day or every other day, they're just going to human beings look for things that are actually out of norm, that don't follow a pattern. So you're trying to sort of synthesize something that doesn't follow a normal repetitive pattern. So that's piece one. And then piece two is I think become more commonly accepted, which is you do want to do that double touch call and email. And you can mix it up. In fact, you see we do this here on day 4 and day 7, that on day 4 we try a call first before the email, and day 7 we do an email and then the call. So just I think the biggest takeaway from this one is obviously the persistence, the multi-channel thing, but the big thing I think is to think about allowing this breathing room for your cadences and allow those touches to expand out over a bit of time. Cool. All right. Hopefully clear so far. No questions yet, but I will take them as they come. If you want, in the Q&A actually here, feel free to answer this one, or just sort of meditate on it, which is, how many activities does it take to actually source an op? So what I mean by this is not how many touches does it take, for one person, but what I mean by this is, let's say you were to take an AE or an SDR, and you were to figure out all those activities in a given month, and then take all the opportunities they generated in a month and come up with this calculation. So the question is, like, how many activities do people have to execute? And the answer may or may not shock you, but it definitely shocked me the first time I saw it, which is it takes about 200, 300, if you're being truly honest, activities: phone, email, social, SMS, all those direct mail that we talked about. It takes all those touches in order to actually get a single opportunity. And I'm defining an opportunity here as a meeting was held and marked as qualified by an account executive. So you did your disco meeting and it was marked as qualified. So it's a heck of a lot of activity. And I mean, SDRs know this intuitively. AEs who are heavy prospectors know this intuitively, but it is a lot of activities. And one of the goals as an SDR is to figure out, is basically to, you have two levers to pull, or as an AE, you have two levers to pull. You either have activity or effectiveness. So, or both, I guess. So you pull one lever, which is just maintain consistency on your activity. But I think you want to calculate this for yourself. And I will say at SalesLoft, we do actually provide our SDRs with like this number, and it's almost like a batting average number. You want to have the fewest number of activities in order to get opportunities. And we have some folks on the team who I refer to as snipers. And these snipers, like the best of the best, are able to get an op probably in like the 80 to 100 activity per op generated range. So there is, even though this is an average, snipers can be quite effective. We've had two questions flow in. One they're related to what we talked about before, is why didn't that cadence I showed, and I'll flash back to it, have direct mail? Excuse me, we do actually have direct mail in our own cadences. This sample cadence I did not integrate it in there, but I'll comment on that. So a couple of ways to think about using the direct mail piece. So we have customers who will send the direct mail piece. I think of one company in particular that loves to send cookies. So they'll send their box of cookies branded and so on to the prospect in advance of actually starting the other touches. So I think that kind of warm up is an appropriate approach. The other one is, I've seen more of lately, but I don't know that I particularly like it, which is like, once you attend the meeting, we will then send you a gift card, or we will then make a donation on your behalf to charity, or we will then XYZ. So the quid pro quo. I don't necessarily love that, because I don't know that you're pulling, like, if you have to provide that incentive, then I think you're taking away a little bit from like uncovering what are truly qualified prospects. It's almost like if you've ever had to staff a trade show booth. Oftentimes trade shows are all about, the value of trade shows for vendors is often about pre-scheduling meetings with people. The people who actually walk around on the trade show floor, just sort of randomly walking around, are most often people just looking for swag. and not really qualified prospects. The other question that came up is, what about what's the usual percentage response by stage on days 1, 2, 4, 7, 11, and so on? I'm not going to cover that in this particular webinar, but if you, Serica, looks like that question came from, if you want, please message me on LinkedIn and I can get that data for you. What I will add a comment at the high level is think about prospecting as a very long tail activity. You're going to get most of your responses at the front end of your cadences, right? So you're going to get the vast majority, if you think about that sort of long tail statistical distribution, emails 1 and 2, calls 1 and 2, you're going to get most of your positive responses at that point. Interestingly, email 2 is one of the highest, and a recommendation on email 2, so here's maybe another, I don't know what other tips you've gotten so far, I'll call this major tip 2 or tip 3, is that second email should be as short as humanly possible, and it should just be a threaded reply to your prior email, and put something in there like "please advise" and nothing else. Or if you want to be more aggressive about it, or there's a lighter one would be "any thoughts?" ? That's a reasonable way to do it. And then the third one, if you want to be aggressive, and it actually is quite effective, is to put in the word "bump," just B-U-M-P. It is super aggressive. I don't think it works well outside of the U.S., but that can work in the U.S. So "please advise," "any thoughts?" or "bump" are all great email 2s that have incredible reply rates. Cool. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little about personalization, because it is, it is the topic that I think is all over the zeitgeist, if you will, of B2B sales right now. So we looked at, in this case, this was about 6 million emails that flow through our system, and we are able to detect what percentage of a template that's served up to a rep actually gets personalized. So if you look at that x-axis there, 0% means we serve the rep a template, and that template might have dynamic tags for the person's first name or company name or whatever dynamic tags you want to use in the subject line or the body of the email. So 0% means they just went with whatever was there. 100% off to the far right there is they blew away the template and wrote their own email. And then the y-axis is pretty self-explanatory, that's reply rate. So what we found is, when you personalize, as you ramp from 0 to 20%, as you override or add about 20% to that email, you will double, you have as statistically with large numbers, you will double your reply rate. So the return on effort is highest for that 20% personalization. And then once you hit 20%, you can see the return basically flatlines. You're not really gaining a lot of benefit. So it doesn't make sense to put a ton of effort beyond that initial personalization. And that curious thing happens when you hit 80%. You might wonder why would you roll off? Like, why wouldn't it just continue on in an upward trend from that point? And the reason is your team, right? Your marketing team, your sales dev team, your ops team, what have you, has put a ton of effort into A/B testing those templates to get them right. And if you blow them away, you may get lucky, sure, and come up with something incredible, but more likely than not, when you're looking at very, very large numbers of emails, you're probably going to do worse than what A/B testing has figured out for you. One question I often get when I show this, by the way, and I think it's a really valid point, is it takes time to do that 20% personalization. So for each business, one needs to find what's right for them. If you are prospecting a relatively small number of I'll call it whale hunting. If you're prospecting a relatively small number of accounts, and there's not expectations that you're doing a ton of dials or emails in any given day, then you probably do want to spend the time personalizing. If you're hitting more of a mass market SMB space, or even micro companies, and we call them emerging companies, then it may not pay to do that. So you really, at the end of the day, you're trying to maximize your opportunity, well, ultimately revenue, but if you work the pipeline backwards, it's like revenue, opportunities, meetings, working that back. So you just need to find where is the right tuning for you. Someone asked a question on the prior slide. They just asked it, which is, does it change between B2B and B2C if you do like 15 touches in 16 days, or does it vary by different industries, like the financial services industry? That cadence I provided, flipping back there, is just a starting point. what I would do is if you don't have a cadence already, start with something like this, and then iterate off of that. In the B2C world, I've tended to see cadences be much more call heavy, but your mileage is you really have to check for yourself. All right, so I said personalized, but like, how do you actually personalize? So this is a pretty typical prospecting email. It's one I got just towards the end of last year, but the ones I've been getting lately look pretty much the same. And we can sort of look at all the different pieces of this, right? Subject line, time to chat, greeting, hey Jeremy. Then you got those three pieces: the hook, the value prop, the call to action, and then you've got your signature. Interestingly, although this is a pretty generic and typical email, and we'll get into this, there's a lot that's actually good in this email with those various elements. And as I said, we'll get into that. But otherwise, it's obviously quite generic. There's nothing in there other than excuse me, putting my first name in there, and then using what must probably be a dynamic tag using our company name. And then, these other companies like KPMG, Airbnb, Microsoft are not like super relevant. We're a mid-sized B2B SaaS company focused on sellers. And right, KPMG provides accounting and consulting services. Airbnb provides travel and hospitality services. Microsoft, right, does what they do. Like, those are not super relevant. So there's some things I would quibble with, but there are some good things. If you are going to personalize, what's a great way to personalize? I'll credit two very smart people, smarter than me people. One who is, they're both highly active now, but one is Beck Holland over at Chorus. And if you don't know who she is, or she's probably, I don't even know, she probably is doing a session on this as well. So
yeah, we actually had her on yesterday. She was on Reel.
Sweet. So yeah, she is on Reel. So you got to follow Beck and do what she says. And then about 20 years ago, and he's still active, is a guy named Jeff Hoffman, who founded and ran a company called Basho Strategies that really talked about a lot of the same things that Beck is talking about today, but her stuff is the bomb. Obviously, you can catch her replay, or you can just find her YouTube videos, which are amazing. So anyway, she talks about 7 or 6 of these kind of progressive ways to prospect, which is if you to personalize. If you can find content that the person has created themselves, then start there. And for people who are active on social media, that's a lot easier. But I think also for executives, right, they may not be creating the content themselves, but they're probably interviewed by other people. So they were on other people's podcasts, or super senior folks potentially on TV or other things, or speaking at conferences. Like, senior people, you could often find content that is original by them in other places. If they haven't created something, maybe they engaged, they liked or shared or commented on something. If you can't find that, then you look on their LinkedIn profile and look at some of their or other places of just things that they value, so that you can reference those particular values. Fourth is, now you're in the 4th, 5th, and 6th, like you're getting into scratching for something that you otherwise don't have, which is demographic information. For example, their role. 5 is their company, or 6 is just, you get even more generic. So you can go through those. Beck, I'm sure, probably went through those. If not, you can watch her stuff, which is amazing. I'm just going to give you one example where when I first met Beck and we were chatting, I decided, you know what, why don't I pretend to prospect Beck using her own methodology? And so here's what I came up with, which was, you can see the subject line is super personalized, right? She has her shtick is flip the script, and I don't even know that she uses the acronym FTS, but I just figured that would be a clever thing to do, and put in something she referenced. And you can see that first sentence there. I've been devouring your FTS videos and loved your anecdote about quote. So I'm actually referencing something that she said in the video. Top 5 reasons why you prefer Pandora over Spotify. And then I do this thing in minute 23 of session 3. what's I think, and then the rest of it, then Beck will talk about the segue. So just like streaming media services, so that's the segue from Pandora and Spotify, and I won't read the rest, but that's the personalized part, is that everything else is sort of standard off the shelf stuff, but that first sentence and then the segue, very, very important, is the segue. You can't just drop into the value prop. So if you got that first sentence and then the segue, and you can segue from almost anything into anything else, then you've got kind of the magic for a hyper personalized email. And this sort of thing does take time and effort to do. And I talked about don't personalize more than 20%. I mean, this took time to do it. I didn't really personalize much more than 20% of this, but super effective. I think one thing that is also comment on here is human beings are able, continue to be able to, I should say, detect when machines are doing work and not people. And they don't value the work of machines as much as they do people. So what I'm getting at here is like, no machine would have taken the leap of faith right now that flip the script should be FTS, or even to understand what FTS probably means to Beck. And yes, a machine probably could do it, but standard machines that are used for marketing and sales engagement don't watch sessions of people's content and are able to pick out like a quote that is super relevant that they can segue. I mean, I'm sure that IBM Watson can probably do that. But my point is, whatever your personalization is needs to look like and legitimately be something a human did. Otherwise, if it looks like a machine, it's not as effective. Couple questions came in, so I'll hit those before I move on, which is typical cadence for the enterprise market. I'll refer people, back to that sample cadence to start off with. I think that's a perfectly fine cadence for the enterprise market. And again, I'm not being market specific on that one at this point, because you will have to A/B test and tune for your own customer base. Ideal email follow-up cycle, someone asked about, which is again, if I'll interpret this two ways, which is like, if somebody replies to you, you want to follow up with them as fast as humanly possible. That's kind of an obvious thing. But otherwise, right, I'm using that +1 rule, which is day 1, day 2, right? I'm going to add 2 now, day 4, add 3, day 7. So 1, 2, 4, 7, 11, 16 is the way I'd approach that. And then, yeah, someone asked what does segue mean. So segue is, how do I bridge? Segue, synonym for segue is bridge. How do I bridge from the first sentence, which is about streaming media services, over to whatever you're selling? Like, we sell a sales engagement platform. So how do I stream from how do I segue or bridge from streaming media, which we have nothing to do with, to sales engagement, but matters to the prospect, to sales engagement, which is something that we care about. All right. Cool. All right. So now let's get actually into some of the actual cadence best practices here, and we're going to go into data science. Most of this is email based. There's a few things that are call based, and this particular one is call based. So I often get the question, what's the best day of the week or the best time of the day to engage? And there are plenty of reports that will show you that there are statistically better days of the week or statistically better times of the day. People, who've studied statistics, know that you can prove with enough sample size, you can prove that very small differences in some cases are statistically significant, but who cares? And that's my point about, on the left-hand side, the reply rate to emails based on day of the week. And as you can see, like, there's small differences between different days of the week. Like, Friday is the worst. Friday happens to be bad because it's Friday afternoon that's bad. Friday morning's bad is good. Saturday is generally bad all day, and then Sunday morning is bad. Sunday evening is fine. My point is, like, you don't have the luxury when you're prospecting of waiting for the best day. It's not like you can just, I don't know, what's the best here is like Monday or Wednesday. You don't have the luxury of only sending emails on Mondays and Wednesdays. So I would not sweat that at all. Don't let that distract you. And the same is true of calling. So we looked at connect rates, which is the graph on the right-hand side. And those are just calls lasting more than 2 minutes by time of day. based on the caller's time zone. We can also do this on the recipient time zone. And you can see the answer there, which is you have about a 6% connect rate regardless of the time of day that you call. And there's people who have opinions about this, but not data, who say, yeah, you should actually call early, like before 9 or after whatever, after 5 or after 6. But that is actually not true. If you're calling early, the executives may or may not be at their desk, but they're no more likely to answer their phone at those times. They're probably prepping for their day or wrapping up to get back to inbox 0 at the end of the day. So someone asked, does it make sense to test time of day and day of week engagement? My answer is unless you're in some industry where you probably already know that matters, I would just not bother to waste time on that. All right. Inbound lead response, I'll just cover briefly. We'll do a couple kind of quick things on that, but everyone knows this already, which is you want to respond as fast as you can to inbound leads. Some data from Topo on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we actually hit 100 companies. So we went on their websites, filled out their demo request buttons, and then tracked how long it took them to get back to us. And of these companies that are sort of household names in the world that we all live in, about call it 60% actually responded within an hour, which is a pretty good response time. Ideally you want to respond immediately, and that's the 40% that did. But there was a solid 40% off to the right hand side there that took much longer to respond, and a full 10% that did not respond at all. So just there are ways to engineer your systems to ensure a near immediate response from individual SDRs and salespeople. I would inbound your often your highest converting channel. I would optimize to get that solved. How are we doing? I'm going to ask my team here, Colin. How are we doing on time?
You're good. Depends if you're at like slide 10 of 1,000 or 10 out of 20. How far through?
We're like halfway through. So yeah, 10 out of 20.
I see we're right on time.
All right, cool.
Yeah, you're doing great. We've got a little bit of a buffer. The next chat doesn't start for another 15 minutes.
All right,
17 minutes, and we want to leave a few for questions, but you've been handling a bunch, so we're doing great.
All right, cool. Keep going then. So subject lines, how long should your subject line be? The ideal subject line length is 1 word. And most often people ask me, what is the magic word? The magic word more often than not is your own company name. So in our own email one for prospecting, we'll put SalesLoft in there just as the company name, as opposed to putting the sort of cliche thing these days of the customer's first name or the customer's company name. Just put your own company name in there, and that works well. And as you can see, shorter is better. I saw this question on LinkedIn the last couple of days. Is like, what about empty subject lines? They're actually better. That's a 0 length subject line. They're actually better than average, but not much better, and certainly not better than the 1 word. I should also explain that the y-axis here is the reply rate multiplier. So a 1.0, the 1 here, just means that people achieve the average reply rates. And then the multiplier is how much better or worse in some cases, like you see the 0.6 here. So you're 40% worse if you have an 8-word subject line. Someone asked about email ideas for COVID, and I will address that as we progress through here. I'll leave a little bit of time at the end because there's a lot. So maybe we want to pin that question, but we'll come back to COVID specific. But this stuff is relevant during COVID as well. But I'll talk about some COVID specific piece. As I mentioned, that 1 word should be your company. The recipient company is not such a bad thing, but you actually start to get reply rate multipliers below 1.0, so a 12% worse reply rate if you use the recipient's first name in the subject line. So that's a no-no. Referrals is the single strongest thing you can do. It's also hard work, and there probably are not enough referrals in most businesses to fill your pipeline adequately. When you do get them, make sure you are explicit about that in the subject line. So if you put referred or referred by, XYZ person in your subject line, you're far more likely to get, as you would expect, a positive response. Somebody asked if you're at like a smaller or lesser known company, should you still put your company name in the subject line? Absolutely, yes. We've looked at that, across sort of different company sizes, and the benefit, even if you work for a smaller company, is there will be no preconceived notions about who your company is. So it will trigger a degree of curiosity, hopefully, for people to go and look there. And like a lot of sales and service is all about making the experience effortless. In fact, there's a great book called, I think, The Effortless Experience, written by the same people who wrote the Challenger Sale book. And so that by not cognitively taxing your prospects in your subject lines, you give them, they have sort of more energy to expend on reading your first sentence. Someone asked about questions and subject lines. I don't think I cover it here, but questions and subject lines are bad. And we actually looked recently at questions in the first sentence of the body, and questions in the first sentence of the body are fairly neutral. Interestingly, exclamation marks as the end of the first sentence in the body are highly effective. You want to be careful, like not to overuse that, but if you do that, you'll get a great result. Emails themselves, just like subject lines, should be short. Keep it to 50-ish words, no more than 100. After 100 words, you start to roll off pretty significantly. So then, remember that email before it said, "Hey, Jeremy"? It turns out that "Hey" is the most effective greeting. So after I found this out, I created a podcast, not because of that, but I was trying to figure out what to name the podcast, and we named the podcast "Hey, Salespeople." It's precisely for this reason, is because "Hey" is the most effective way to start your email. "Hi" is okay. When you get overly formal, like "hello," you start to roll off. I don't exactly know why just first name is so ineffective. My guess is I think like in the before people, it's again about people understanding what is machine made and not machine made, and it was just less likely that "Hey" would have been machine made in the past. People may get immune to this, and this, as everyone starts using "Hey," and has been using "Hey" more frequently since we've been talking about this, I expect this would roll off. It would roll off a little bit. We looked at sort of all different types of treatments in emails. So whether you use bullets or dashes in your prospecting emails, not a good idea to use either, frankly. If you have to do it, use a dash instead of a bullet. A part of the reason that this is happening, I think, may not just be because of the bullet or the dash. It also is probably because your emails will tend to be longer. So there's a correlation, I think, between use of bullets and dashes and longer emails. So either way, I would just avoid those and keep those emails like as plain text as you humanly can. And this really gets at that plain text aspect, which is like all of these have reply rate multipliers below 1, meaning they're bad. So underline, you get a 13% drop in reply rate. Bold 17, italics, what is that, 24% off of the 1.0. So just avoid anything that looks like a kind of spammy marketing email. Someone asked about using "Hey" for non-English language. Yeah, we actually did look at this, and we noticed that if you put, what the person's native language, if you address them with sort of that, whatever it is, "Hola," for example, in Spanish, or "Privyet" in Russian, or whatever it happens to be in other languages, that also is equally effective. So you would want to translate, obviously, that to your local language. We looked at the use of links, and it turns out that like 0 or 1 link is fine. If you start to put a bunch of links in, obviously it starts to look like marketing, so you want to skip over that. Someone asked me this week, should I use a raw URL or hypertext link? And it turns out that it does not matter whether you use raw URL or hypertext. So obviously, if you're doing any tracking, you want to bury that into hypertext. Somebody else did a study that was published in the last week or two that showed, though, with the raw links, you don't want to use shortened links like bit.ly or goo.gl. So avoid shortened links because those do lower click-through rates. Someone asked about images and color. Avoid color for sure. I don't know if I have it in here. I don't have it in here, but the images, you can have one image is fine. We also looked at GIFs in the last 2 weeks, and GIFs have no impact, positive or negative, on reply rates. So you're fine to use them. They don't help you. Images are fine to use. One image is fine to use. More than one image is bad. And then that email that I showed you, the sample email that was sort of generic, had signed best. I used to use regards. I'm an old dude, so I used regards for a very long time, and that turns out to be quite poor. The best way to sign off is best, so I would just use that in your prospecting. I think that is my last tip. So just to wrap up, just make sure you're focused on making yourself better with more effective in your prospecting. Use data science where possible, but also A/B test things to make sure that these things actually work in your particular industry and context. And then again, you're trying to find the right balance of personalization and not personalization for you. If you're prospecting enterprise, relatively fewer touches, but the touches matter a lot more, then you're going to want to personalize that 20% using some of those techniques that Jeff Hoffman and Beck have been talking about. Cool. I'm going to hit a few. Now I'm going to pound questions until, Colin, you rip me out of here. So let's see. We got, will the deck be shared? Colin, I think yes, right? You guys are going to share the deck?
For sure. Yep.
Cool. Someone asked me about attachments. We did not look at whether emails with attachments get read. It's hard to do that, and whether they have higher reply rates. That we can do. My guess is attachments are a bad idea because people are super wary of security concerns. I would always use a link instead of an attachment. Difference in effectiveness by industry of prospect with that hey or hi. I don't know. We looked at, as I said, 6 million emails across industries. I would suspect these are very sort of human rated. So my hypothesis on that one is I would still try to use hey independent of industry, but do what you feel is right. If you're selling to, I don't know, very senior financial services people, hey may be a little too relaxed, but maybe not. It could be a pattern interrupt to do something that they don't expect and is more familiar. Especially, I think, even in industries that you'd think, back in the day, people all wore suits and ties. It's a different blouses and skirts and whatever. It's a different era than it used to be. Let's see. Someone asked, is it a good idea to share interview demo information with a client? I presume they're talking about agendas there. And yes, I do think sharing the agenda is an important thing. And I wouldn't just share it. I would actually ask for their feedback on it. As here's the proposed agenda. They may or may not reply, but it's a very conscientious touch for them. Someone asked about cold outbound via Instagram. No, I have no idea. I have not looked at that. Only via LinkedIn.
We don't have
email.
any.
Yeah,
I can add a little bit. We don't have any data, not anything near what you have, but we have tested it out. And in certain industries, one specific where we were going after restaurants, it worked like gangbusters.
Cool.
So they're pretty responsive, but I think it's going to be one of those things. It depends on the audience and who's manning or who's behind the Instagram page, site, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm a B2B person, and so I've learned to just only engage, if you're through social, only engage in LinkedIn, not Facebook, not Instagram, not whatever. But I imagine that's more of a B2C question. Email threading, yes, you definitely want to thread. What we do is we thread thread emails in pairs. So we do email 1 and then a threaded reply with the re. We do email 2, take away, not threaded, and then we thread email 4 with a re. So we're always doing pairs of emails, and that tends to work the best. The results, the stuff I've talked through is mostly English speaking countries, US and Europe. We don't have a lot of data on Australia. So again, you'd want to A/B test to figure out what's right for you. Advance my slide, by the way, because I do want people to connect with me on LinkedIn if they want to, and then if you want to find the personalization stuff, there's a summary of a much deeper example of how I would prospect Beck using all 6 of her techniques. And then last but not least, let's see, in a scenario where someone's agreed to a call but you haven't specified a time, is there a suggested amount of time to wait between following up to get the call locked down as fast as humanly possible? You do not, what is the expression? Time kills deals. So you want to, people's interest wanes quickly. So as soon as someone agrees to a meeting, you want to lock that time down. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, make sure to get their cell phone so that if they ghost you, well, first of all, you prevent them from ghosting you by texting them whatever 5-10 minutes before the call. But then if they ghost you, you have a way to get them back on. All right, Colin, you tell me. Should I keep going? More questions are flowing in.
Just these last 2, and then we got a jet.
All right. In this area, we got that one, so that one's done. So I guess one more. Embedding videos. Oh, great question. So we do have data on this, and it's super subtle, which is video is effective, but only under 2. But you have to watch out for 2 things. One is it should not be in your first email. It should be in your second email. And then secondly, the video shouldn't just like be slammed on there. The video what you need to do is you need to put, I don't know, a couple sentences of hopefully a little personalized, but context to introduce the video. So yes, video, but it's subtle, and it's effortful to do that. That I sometimes am a little wary of requiring video-based steps in cadences for SDRs and AEs who are prospecting, because it can jam up and cause cadence backlogs.
And then all of a sudden you get a million tasks outstanding, you're not hitting your targets.
Yeah, let it be a nice to have extra for special prospects, not for everybody.
Perfect. Just before we say goodbye, I want to try something here. If you bear with me a couple seconds, I'm just gonna share my screen. I promised to the team I'd have a better way of doing this next time, because it's a bit janky trying to share my screen and do all this. But I'm going to do that with sound. We had a quick word from Aaron just talking about our growth assessments. Bear with me, Twitch. I'm just going to change that view for you. Much better.
So it's been a lot of years since creating the outbound sales team at Salesforce.com. And in those years, I've worked with countless companies who are trying to get their outbound sales team together, their growth plans together, and it's become a specialty to go in and do growth assessments. All right, what exactly do you need to do to identify the problems you've got with your sales plan, with your outbound plan, and what exactly do you need to do to fix it? All right, if there's only 3 things you could do this year, what are those top 3 priorities? If you got a team that's not performing the way you want, what do you do about it? How do you turn that struggle into success and prepare for success this year and for the rest, because things are not going to go back to the way they were?
Perfect. Thanks for putting up with me there. And I'm just going to go back to Jeremy. Where'd you go? Speaker view. Let me get back to gallery view. Here we go. I promise I know how to use Zoom. There we go. Zoom and OBS.
I disappeared to give Aaron his floor there.
Oh, that's why I jumped on there. I'm like, why is my face? Why is my ugly mug showing here? Jeremy, thanks so much. So we've got in the Slack, we'll have your slides. We'll also have a link to your LinkedIn if people want to reach out and say thanks. If they want to learn more about the source of where all this data came from, what's the best place for them to check it out?
It's always, I'm like a LinkedIn junkie. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me questions. I love when people ask, hey, have you looked at this? And then we go look at that and then publish that out for folks. So yeah, ideas welcome.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. Really appreciate it. You'll be live in Slack. So if anybody is, has further questions, join the Slack group, hit up Jeremy. He'll be on there. We'll be on there to track him down. He's also on LinkedIn if you're outside of today. But Jeremy, thanks for joining us. Everybody on Zoom and Twitch, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks. Bye-bye.